Hello everyone, welcome to IMPAKT TV. My name is Niv Fux and I'm happy to host Kristofer Gansing here for our interview. Thank you for joining us, Kristoffer.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'll just start with a short introduction about your work. So Kristofer Gansing is a professor of artistic research and director of the International Center for Knowledge in the Arts. Previously, he was the artistic director of the Transdisciplinary Art and Culture Festival Transmediale in Berlin, directing 9 editions from 2012 to 2020. And through his research, curatorial activity, and writing, he develops transversal and post-digital perspectivism and methodologies that aims to both situate and transform cultural practices. He's particularly interested in moving beyond representational forms in favor of a humble epistemology of agency and sociocultural change through artistic practice as a form of situated, enacted, and performative knowledge. Yeah. Maybe we can start with you explaining more about this and perhaps about your kind of research in this form.
Sure. I mean, it's fitting we're at IMPAKT Festival. So, as you mentioned, I've been doing also festivals like this for many years, combining that kind of work with, let's say, research or more academic type of work. So for me, really like integration of theory and practice. You mentioned also I'm a professor of artistic research, and that's a field where that very much comes together. That is something that has followed me throughout my, I don't know, one should call it career, but I guess nowadays one should, looking back, it's sort of a career. Unpacking that bio statement is perhaps a little bit difficult in a short introduction, but let's say that my approach to something like a digital arts festival has always been to try and think also about the performative aspects of doing events such as this as more than just representing the best of, for example, what media art or digital culture has to offer at the moment. That's the traditional role of these festivals, that we come together once a year, or if it's a biennial, every other year, and so on, and kind of showcase what has been done in the field. Whereas I was kind of increasingly more interested in taking the form of this type of event as a meeting point very seriously, not only because of the networking, but as a place where you can come and also get your usual mode of practice challenged in some way. So kind of the transformatory aspects of cultural events like this also interest me. But of course, that is also challenging in times when, not only because of COVID and so on, but also because of increasing maybe societal polarization and who actually comes together at these kinds of events. These are kind of issues that I've been trying to kind of think about in my own curating. And in my research, I mean, I am a media communication scholar originally, or actually coming from film studies, very much humanities type of person. So, there I've more taken perhaps an historical angle, or like what I call a transversal, which also is reflected in the curatorial methodology, like trying to perhaps take a medium, like actually I worked once with a festival for overhead projectors, which sounds a bit antiquated, but it was about thinking about the meaning of a specific medium from the analog to the digital age across its institutional, educational, technological, social. So kind of making these kind of cuts into different contexts. And festivals also like IMPAKT or Transmediale are very, let's say, adaptable to that kind of approach, because they are transdisciplinary from the get-go, and you have this opportunity of, let's say, a not so instrumentalized area of cultural production, where you can actually move from histories to contemporary edgy practices to perhaps other more kind of scientific or sociological angles. So I'm kind of interested in that transversal space and not a well-defined, actually, disciplinary space, if that at all makes sense.
Yeah, perfectly. Yeah. I think so part of your research was also looking at early cinema, right, and making some connections to sort of digital societies or post-technology, post-digital societies and data-driven societies as well, right? Can you talk
This is
about
some of my completely new stuff, actually. So because I'm working as a director of a center for artistic research that actually unites film, visual arts, performing arts, and music. And I was interested in specifically the medium of film as an underexplored setting within the discussion of research and practice-based research. And my thesis is actually in this work that film from the very get-go as a medium is intimately tied to research in the scientific sense, in the sense of research and development. You will see that some of the earliest experiments in moving image was made, is also beautifully actually illustrated by a film that I'm presenting by an artist called Kajsa Dahlberg tomorrow. Early film was often made in order to measure human movement and quantify it in different ways, or animal movement, like the early experiments by Edward Muybridge, very canonic, kind of the birth of moving image, to determine if the horse's hooves were touching the ground or not. And so from that, I was kind of interested in like, what is the counterpoint in artistic research? Artistic research is like this discipline that has been institutionalized into PhD programs and educational agendas in recent years. But actually, from the very beginning of film as a scientific kind of endeavor, you've had artists working, of course, within the medium in somehow, let's say, establishing perhaps counter-narratives or methodologies to this more empirical, very positivist idea of film as a medium for objective quantification and so on. So I was interested in those counterpositions and thinking about them as prototypical forms of artistic research rather than framing them as one usually does as kind of the breaking with the narrative tradition of film, like avant-garde cinema and so on. The history of that is usually told in relation to the evolution of narrative cinema. So I'm interested in telling that story as a counterpoint to scientific research, rather, and the film as a medium within that setting. And that brings us to the current digital reality, because today research is integral to the digital image. So if you go to Netflix, you will see that they also have, behind the scenes, a huge research department. It's called. You can also find advertisements on YouTube for Netflix research, which is driven by machine learning, of course, and data analysis. And so when we consume these images, we are objects of this research. And they're also researching intensively the nature of those images and how to optimize the flows in different ways and categorizing them and so on. So I call that a cinema of extractions. And there was a very famous thesis by Tom Gunning, a film studies scholar from the US. He called the early cinema the cinema of attractions.
Yeah.
So I'm tracing this evolution in this work.
So how really, if we want to talk about this a bit more, about machine learning type of research and what Netflix calls research and development, how do you sort of see that plays into this general picture of what we are seeing today as research? Like, obviously it's not the same thing as artistic research. How is it even okay to call it research, or is it really how do you see those kind of two things aligning?
If you can call the Netflix kind of...
Obviously the kind of research and development, those machine learning, those data-driven research is very different from what we would think as artistic research or even classical research. What do you think this kind of tells us about the sort of trends that we are seeing today? Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that it's not compliant with earlier paradigms of research, in the sense that it is a sort of hyper intensification of certain, let's say, like empiricists, positivist strands within science that, and others have pointed this out, actually, like people like critical kind of digital media scholars like Felix Stalder and so on, that we are seeing with datafication a sort of return of tropes of science that actually we thought we might have left behind. That somehow, a more nuanced idea of human behavior in relation to social and political and cultural context, have kind of abandoned some of those very let's say, more linear ideas of relations between knowledge and behavior that you found, for example, within the post-twist strand. So it's interesting how perhaps data analysis and data science has brought back a little bit antiquated ideas of how somehow the human civilization works and how you can quantify and predict it and so on. So and in relation to artistic research, it's a little bit like, sometimes it's a little bit tragic because it's as if this data science is somehow the cutting edge against which we somehow all have to now work. And so, of course, for example, within humanities, not only within the arts, but in general, you have the development also called digital humanities, which we've seen in the past 10, 15 years, adopting a lot of these same, like say, languages, methodologies, and so on, that you would find in something like the Netflix research department. And I mean, that's a double-edged sword. You have to kind of work with this knowledge in order to understand it, or these methods, but on the other hand, you inherit then maybe the same somehow reductive ideas of that sometimes this quantification of human behavior offers, because it's optimized in order to turn a profit within a company, or to design some interfaces or some algorithms, and that's obviously not necessarily the ultimate goal of an artistic practice.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so tomorrow you will be moderating a conversation after the film program under optimization, which focuses on what we are talking as well, capitalist processes of optimization for efficiency through machines and automated systems, which makes human labor obsolete. I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more about the program and kind of your impressions or your view on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I should state as a disclaimer, I was only invited to moderate and introduce the program, but it's curated by Johan Wüst and Erik Bünger, the curators of the festival. Yeah, so I had actually nothing to do with the choosing of these titles, although some of them, or at least one of them, was already in the Transmediale Festival in 2017, so I do know some of the context. So under optimization, obviously a program that deals with the paradigm of efficiency within, let's say, technological or also, profit-driven, I would say, structures and societies within capitalism, not only kind of within Western capitalism, but it has a quite broad take, this program, in terms of geographies. And we see there especially also the meeting between humans working under these supposedly optimized systems, efficient systems, and also the kind of frictions that can arise sometimes when the machine logic meets actually the capacities of the human body to actually do these tasks in this way that has been envisioned by the system and how it was designed. And then also the possibilities maybe also for resistance, or also the impossibilities sometimes of resistance. So you have a movie by Kajsa Dahlberg, a Swedish artist, that one I already kind of mentioned, which is dealing with this time measurement technologies, or actually scientific paradigms developed all the way back from that film history that I was talking about, as a way to kind of measure the time required to do certain movements that you would do, for example, in a factory session or a factory setting or a workplace setting. And then from that on, trying to optimize, okay, how much time does one human need to do certain tasks? And then they complexify it also, like relation to what you also physiologically are able to do as a combination of different movements and so on. And it's a whole kind of system theory in itself. And you see people there kind of doing equations of how they would then employ workers to do these tasks in certain time frames and so on. So, and that is very kind of current at, for example, iPhone assembly factories in China, and you have voices in this movie about like the lived realities under those kind of regime. We just have the title is a bit difficult. It's called Reach, Grasp, Move, Position, Apply, Force. So directly adhering to these coded the names of these movements within this system. So that's super fascinating. It has a long history. And then another movie by Anio Yortkutu called Manifesto is like looking at such optimization within a completely different setting within kind of Western art education and the neoliberalization of that, where you suddenly have this kind of almost co-working like universities that replace the old, more autonomous art schools, and how artists at all can work within that kind of setting. And those architectures are made under a kind of a pretense of optimizing also the learning situation in some form and making it more social and so on. Quite different, of course, from these kind of factory settings, but still, a place where a precarity of existence arises when the systems are not compatible in some way.
Yeah. And where time actually plays a critical role, right? This idea of efficiency and. Okay, I was wondering if maybe we could, we have a random AI questionnaire. So basically, if you want to choose a number from here, then we will let the AI decide.
Okay.
Yeah, just trying to spread it out a bit.
Only one number, not a combination.
For now, yeah.
Well. It has to be number 10 then, of course.
Okay, yeah, super. So with number 10, we will see the question forming in a second.
The festival refers to technology as a totalizing system that is immunized against all failure and able to perpetuate itself ad infinitum. Do you agree to this vision, and can you elaborate on this vision?
Okay.
So if I got, it was a long question.
Yeah, maybe we can see it again and just to recap.
The festival refers to technology as a totalizing system that is immunized against all failure and able to perpetuate itself ad infinitum.
Okay.
Yeah, totalized system, immunized against all failure and able to perpetuate itself ad infinitum. What do you think about this statement?
I don't agree with it.
Okay.
I think it's factually wrong. But I mean, it is the real curse of smooth operations, I think, is the curse of smooth operations. It sounds very tautological, but it's the belief, of course, in that type of statement.
Do you agree to this vision? Can you elaborate on this
smooth
vision?
Operations, because it's kind of obscures so much else that is going on in technology and how kind of interdependent it is on lived life within such systems. And also the fact that, yeah, they need, as Linda Hilfling-Ritterstätter just demonstrated in her keynote, they need to be constantly upkept and maintained by someone who's usually not just another machine, but humans reduced to that kind of idea. So I don't agree with it, but I think it's good to think with it as a provocation.
Okay, great. Should we try another one from here, maybe, just to challenge the AI once more?
Exactly. Well, you can choose a number too for me.
Yeah, let's go for 6.
Yeah. 6.
Is there good and bad technology? Or simply good and bad use of technology?
Yeah, the ultimate question, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. How difficult. I think there is good or bad technology in a very objective sense. Of course, there is crappy technology, there's well-made technology.
Yeah. But bad in the sense of malice. Do you think there's a bad intention as well, or?
Yeah. Do artifacts have politics? Is another similar question that often is repeated. Yeah, no. There's no, I think it's banal to say there's only good or bad use of technology, because it can be flawed also from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a moral, I don't think technology has a moral
More conscious.
from the get-go.
Yeah, that's about human and how we are using it. All right. I was wondering because, as we mentioned, you directed 9 editions of Transmediale for 9 years almost. And I'm curious to see in what way these type of technological transformation have informed your kind of curatorial process. So what kind of changes were seen also in the kind of art sector and media sector throughout your work there that you can kind of highlight to maybe point out on a bigger idea or bigger trend or something that kind of symbolizes this period of throughout those 8-9 years.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's easy to try, or I mean, in hindsight, to offer all kinds of wise words. I like to kind of avoid to seem like that kind of person who knows perfectly about the past and the future, but could keep learning. And I think that's the lesson, like to be humble around this type of developments that you ask me of. Because, I mean, you ultimately do these kind of festivals very much as part of the times. And so you might be doing something that seemed totally urgent and it's laughable 5 years later. And maybe 10 years later, it's again something that, no, wait, that's something to think about. So that one should be careful. But I think one point is that we've seen on more of a curatorial, organizational level, like, a strive for recognizing that everything doesn't have to be that coherent. That sounds strange, but if you went to this year's Documenta, for example, you had this much more like opening up towards collective processes and other knowledge systems that also require another idea of aesthetics, that not everything is just like, packaged to be a smooth operation, but you can allow for dissonance and you can allow for something that would have seemed out of place or not professional or kitschy, because it's actually necessary that we think our world problems together in a more open and inclusive way. I think media art festivals have been good at this. I mean, media art festivals are this kind of hybrid setting where, or digital culture in general, where things have also been allowed to be process-based and collective. But I think we can be better at including stuff that is not at all digital. I think this is being done this year also at IMPAKT, of course, but there is no cutting edge against what we have to always reach. So it's just this kind of humble approach that I would advocate.
Yeah, so you mean, like, if we have really expand a bit on this example of Documenta that you mentioned, actually this more kind of open processes and more emphasis on process rather than result. They are indicating, you think, also a sense of an openness from the audience towards it, because in a way the more technology becomes more refined, then are we becoming more open to these type of exhibitions? Or
I mean, I think one still has to be critical about what we do with this type of work, also with media, and be attentive to the materiality and the politics of it. But at the same time, we have to recognize that this idea of criticality and our ideas of media, when we are here situated in Utrecht right now, right, it's like not the same as in another place, and maybe there are other urgencies, So it's like about recognizing the different vantage points that could be out there on the kind of work that is being done. And I'm not advocating that everything is just a process and never get finished. It's like what Ort Halpern explored in our keynote yesterday, the epitome of neoliberalism, that it's always a test bed and we can always start over and so on. But the need for, let's say, I don't know, perhaps more somehow holistic even, or like cosmologies of science and technology that are not so rational as we're kind of used to within this kind of setting, that we can design the next we can design our way out of a lot of problems, and that's maybe not even the case. It's maybe that we'll have to get rid of even of some practices because they are too destructive and so on.
Well,
I'm not.
yeah.
Now it gets a bit rambling, but it's just the feeling that when we package cultural events too much with smart themes and so on, we kind of, I don't know. I think that Documenta showed another way. They instead of using curatorial concepts that should be kind of guiding everything, they offered concepts to think with, and they rephrased the languages so you could have used other terms that could even seem more, again, neoliberal, but they chose very consciously, we're going to translate almost everything into these terms that we have been working with, and take it or leave it. But I think it was good to practice and good to think with, and opened up other collectivities than we're used to in the Western setting. So,
Good. Maybe we have time for one more of the AI question. But now it's your turn to maybe choose another number.
So, number 4 then.
Yes.
Who do you see as the most inspiring philosophers, authors, artists when it comes to thinking about technology and our relationship to it?
Inspiring philosophers and authors.
Well, I kind of refuse to name drop in this way.
But maybe we can think about as as affecting your work. It doesn't have to be this general.
No. I think like for me, actually, most inspiration has always come from culture in general. That sounds really weird, but like actually popular culture. And I get more inspired by kind of trying to relate to my son's YouTube consumption than necessarily reading the latest kind of media theory book. I'm very inspired by that kind of work too, and very nerdy about kind of taking a lot of stuff in. But mostly, I think like popular culture inspires me to think about something or take something further. Yeah.
Great. I think that's a really good note to finish. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you, the audience, for joining us, and hope to see you soon at the festival. Thanks.
Thank you.